Hello, everyone. This is Logan Williams reporting for Quality Trades and Construction Business TV. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Laine Himmelmann, Director of Development for the Greater Sacramento Area Habitat for Humanity. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's get into it. As a Sacramento native, what did you observe growing up here that might have ultimately compelled you to want to be a part of an organization like Habitat for Humanity?
I was born and raised in Sacramento. I actually grew up in Clarksburg. My parents built our home that I lived in for the first 20 years of my life with their own two hands. And, I think I just grew up having the opportunity to have a safe, stable home. And I think that foundation really provided me with a lot of opportunity, even when later in life, our family experienced some pretty extreme financial strife. And we ended up not being able to stay in our home. And it definitely really shook our foundation. But because I had grown up in a stable home and I'd been able to receive a really quality education, it enabled me to continue to have, a future that was pretty bright, regardless of no longer having the income to support some of those dreams. And, going to Christian Brothers, they really instilled in us, enter to learn, leave to serve. And I think that that's something that has really stuck with me as I went to college and started to think about what I wanted to do. And at that time, I wasn't really sure. I, was an English major, but when I was going to Gonzaga University, I worked for the Red Cross, and it was my first kind of connection to working in the nonprofit world. And then when I came home, which was smack dab in the middle of the recession, when jobs were, pretty hard to find, which of course makes me really sympathetic to job seekers right now.
Yes.
It was really challenging trying to find a job during the recession, but I can't imagine trying to find a job during a pandemic as a new worker. But I started looking for roles in the nonprofit world, and Habitat was hiring. And at that time, I didn't know much about Habitat for Humanity. I heard the name. I didn't know that there was one locally that was doing work in our community. But what initially drew me to Habitat more than the affordable housing piece was just the really unique way that Habitat brought the community together to help make a difference in others' lives. And there was just something so beautiful about that, because people that would never normally meet, because of Habitat being this natural convener, especially on the construction site, where you'll have these corporate teams or these more affluent supporters who come out to, these neighborhoods like Oak Park or Del Paso Heights, or areas where they might not typically frequent, and they might have misconceptions about what those areas are like. Well, because of Habitat and coming to build on the construction site, they get to see these neighborhoods and the incredible people that are, really, really hardworking, that are living in these neighborhoods, just looking for the opportunity to have a hand up, have a decent neighborhood like everyone wants for themselves and their children. And they would work alongside, these low-income families who Habitat was helping build their dreams. And it would forge these incredible connections, and just it showed really the power of a community. And when people from all areas of life come together with one common purpose, the incredible things that can happen. And I guess you could say I just drank the Kool-Aid at that point, and it's just continue to look at ways that I could support the mission and the growth of this beautiful organization. And month I'll be celebrating 10 years.
Oh wow, yeah, that's a great accomplishment, big accomplishment in a long time, and it's so great to hear that you're so dedicated to the cause. So what are your responsibilities as a Director of Development at Habitat for Humanity?
My primary responsibility is overseeing all of the fundraising for the affiliate. So this year my department will raise about $2.6 million in donations. So those are often donations from generous individuals, donations that come from foundations or corporations, as well as a very small bit of government grant funding. We don't receive a lot of government funding. The majority of our financial support comes from local donations from our region, as well as we also get funding from our Restore, which is kind of like a Home Depot meets Goodwill type operation, where we sell donated new and used home furnishings and building supplies. And then another stream of our funding comes through our Habitat homeowners mortgage repayments. Go into what we call a fund for humanity, which is recycled to help provide more opportunities for other families. But I oversee the $2.6 million in donations that we solicit to help fund our operation. And then I also oversee our media and our marketing. So working with our local television and radio and print media partners, and then I also oversee our volunteer program. We engage about 2,500 volunteers a year, helping on our construction sites, as well as in our Restore and on various committees and through in-kind support. We have a pretty small staff. We have a little over, I think, between 25 to 28 employees on our entire team, and that includes our construction department, who's running all of our active home build and home repair projects and community projects, our Restore warehouse team that's running, a $1 million retail operation, and then those of us that work in the office that do, volunteer services, fundraising. We service and finance all of our mortgages, so our qualified loan originators, our folks that are working with our families, and a number of other administrative tasks. So really small team. So the volunteer piece is really critical to enabling us to be able to build the amount of homes that we're building and serve the number of people that we're serving.
Happy 35th anniversary, Habitat for Humanity in Greater Sacramento. Happy anniversary to you.
We're celebrating our 35-year anniversary this year, and Habitat started out really mom and pop. We were founded by a group of volunteers, and the volunteer piece is still really critical. We kind of call our staff, our volunteers, our supporters, the Habitat family, but it very much is like a family in that we're all just looking for ways to continue to support one another and build forward to meet the need. And COVID has shown us that though we experienced some really, really gut-wrenching challenges when it kind of gut punched us, because of the strong foundation and the incredible Habitat family, we've been able to build back and stay resilient through COVID, which is, honestly, nothing short of miraculous.
Right, exactly. So I do have some COVID questions, but before we get to that, what do you think has been one of your greatest challenges as the Director of Development?
Fundraising in general is not easy because you're relying on the generosity of spirit of others to believe in what you're doing and to want to invest in it and support it without really any return beyond the impact that they get to witness from their support. So I think one of our biggest challenges is that we do not receive a lot of government funding. People are pretty shocked when they hear that we don't receive a lot of local government support. For instance, the local city council recently received $89 million in CARES funding from the federal government. That was additional funding beyond their traditional budget. And though, we did advocate to receive some funding, we didn't receive any. And we also don't receive any, traditional funding from the city budget. So I think that's one of our biggest challenges, is that, many nonprofits receive a substantial amount of their budget is coming from either federal, state, or local government sources. And we just unfortunately haven't been able to tap into that. And I think a lot of it is because we focus on affordable home ownership, and there tends to be a misconception that it is a better investment to put funds into rental.
Right.
And that's something that we've been really trying to showcase, so that, an affordable rental unit in Sacramento costs over $400,000 to build. There was just a giant article in the Sacramento Bee, but homeownership builds equity for families. And our families that we serve traditionally are families that, through lack of opportunity and often even historic systemic racism, have been kept out of the ability to own a home for many, many decades. Most of our families that we serve are, people of color, women, people who you traditionally see have been kept out of the market, and that ability to build equity and wealth for their families. So there's that piece of home ownership that rental just can't offer, but also because of our program being a self-help affordable housing program, in that our homeowner partners help build their homes. They put in 500 hours of sweat equity before they purchase their home for a 30-year fixed rate, 0% interest mortgage. Well, because of that sweat equity piece, we actually have a prevailing wage exemption. So our homes cost about $220,000, so nearly half as much as a rental unit. But we just haven't been able to quite be the neck that turns the head on that for some reason. And so we frequently get left out of the table when it comes to government funding. And so we work really hard to rally the community through private donations, but there's just so much we could do if we were able to tap into those larger buckets that government funding offers.
You brought up the sweat equity term. It brings up another question. I'm kind of going off tangent here, but can you talk about equity and why it is important for, low-income families that may not be able to afford a house to have equity, and why equity is important to sort of enable families to own this piece of property that they help build?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, the way to get out of poverty is to build wealth. And the number one way to build wealth in this country historically has been to own property. And when you own property, you have the ability to then pass that wealth down generationally through your family. Something I think that people are only starting to now get a better understanding and grasp of is how, in the United States and in our Sacramento region as well, there have been such blockades and historic racism when it comes to housing, which have prevented people of color from being able to access home ownership. And, that up and through, the 60s until the Fair Housing Act was passed. You look at the areas in our region, and there's a reason why there are such heavy concentrations of people of color in certain areas and not in others. And it's because up until the 60s, they weren't allowed to live anywhere but the areas like Oak Park and Del Paso Heights. So when, people of color are kept out of the opportunities to own a home, and we're working on I'm going to share this story really quickly because I think it paints a picture. We're working on a home repair project right now for a Black World War II veteran. He's 95 years old. He lives in Dwnld. He enlisted when he was 16, served in World War II. He was in Japan when the bomb dropped. And, he came home. Well, everybody talks about VA loans, which are an incredible thing. Well, when he got out of the Army after World War II, he couldn't access a VA loan because VA loans weren't offered to all veterans. They were only offered to white veterans.
Right.
Nor could he access a traditional home loan because traditional home loans were also only offered to Caucasians. And when you look at that and, you look at the suburbs were financed by the federal government with loans given only to Caucasians. So when you really start to peel back the layers of history and you look at, how people of color were kept out of the ability to own a home. And what does that mean? Well, they were kept out of the opportunity to, build equity, to build wealth, to pass that home down from generations, except in areas that were considered to be undesirable. So by offering an opportunity for families that, have been traditionally kept out of the housing market to get their foot in the home ownership door, to build that wealth, especially with an affordable mortgage. So our mortgages are they're capped at 30% of the homeowner's income when they're accepted into the program. So, and they're also the homes that we build are very energy efficient. So we've been putting solar on our homes for the last 10 years. So way before it was required, as well as a number of other green features. We're actually now building all of our homes to be all electric, and we're putting EV wiring. So just making them really, really sustainable, because the idea is we want to be able to sell a family a home and for them to not just be able to afford it, but for them to have the income that they will be able to pursue additional education or pursue additional job training, provide for their children without all of their funds just going to keeping a roof over their head, and really taking people from where they're just surviving, which is where many of our families are. They might be living 8 people to a 2-bedroom apartment because that's the only way they can also afford groceries and to pay their utility bills. Or we've had families living in garages. When you're just focused on surviving, getting by to the next day, you're not able to think about, how am I going to send my kids to college? Or how can I, maybe work one job instead of three part-time jobs? You can't think about a year, 2 years from now, because all you can think about is the next day or the end of the week. And so I think there's benefits beyond just putting a roof over someone's head, but also the psychological benefits, the feelings of hope of being able to plan for the future. And then of course that financial stability and that springboard to being able to achieve other hopes and dreams that unfortunately too many low-income families aren't able to even dream about, because they're in such strife because of the mounting bills and the stress that they're under because of the skyrocketing cost of housing right now.
So it's funny that we went off into this subject, but my father grew up in Chicago, south side of Chicago, and he was telling me when he was in elementary school, and he was telling me that he would look out the window and they'd be tearing down the neighborhood that stood there. They have to carve out this highway, this freeway system. And I also saw on this documentary that their rationale of where to carve these freeway systems was to put it through the low-income communities that actually wouldn't have been that low income, but because they wanted to carve it out through the communities of color, then it displaced all these people, and now they had to find new places to live. Then we see rise to projects and things like that. So can you talk a little bit about displacement and how you all help to sort of alleviate the problem of displacement?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because if you look at the history of Sacramento, right now I think a big conversation is, why do we have this huge freeway that separates Old Sac and the river from the downtown area? And that freeway was put in there for the exact same reason, looking to displace people of color who were living there and to force them to move by putting a freeway there and then creating more housing for non-people of colors. I think it's an ugly history that people like to sweep under the rug, but I think it's critical that we all educate ourselves about our ugly history, because it's only in doing that we'll be able to start looking at equity-based solutions for how we can right the wrongs of that history. But in terms of habitat, we definitely do focus heavily with our neighborhood revitalization program on trying to prevent gentrification. So not only are we, building new homes in, predominantly underserved neighborhoods for low-income families, but a couple years ago, we also jump-started our neighborhood revitalization and home repairs program. And that is, I would say, the one that's especially critical in helping to fight gentrification. And North Oak Park is already pretty heavily gentrified, and so we're focusing more so on South Oak Park, Central Oak Park, and helping to repair homes for low-income homeowners, predominantly people of color, and making sure that they don't end up getting coded out of their home or forced to sell because they have a critical home repair that they can't afford to do. And so we do a lot of roof repairs, critical health and safety exterior repairs, weatherization. Habitat's very much a a hand up, not hand out. And I think when you look at the partners that we work with, both on the home repair and the home build side, they're people that have a lot of pride. And I think that the hand up, not hand out really resonates with them. There's also a 20%, 0% interest repayment that we do with our home repair. So there is some cost, but it's extremely affordable. And we go in there with volunteers alongside the homeowner, and we help to repair and preserve their home so that they can, if they're a senior, that they can age in place with dignity without worrying about where they're going to spend, the last 10, 15, 20 plus years of their life. And for low-income families, really providing that stability and that ability to take a breath and not worry that they might become displaced. And in doing so, and really focusing just on homeowners, we purposely don't do rentals. And the reason for that is what we never want to see is we repair a rental home, single family rental home in an area like Oak Park, and then because it looks nicer, the owner comes in and feels that they can charge more rent or displace the family that's currently living there. So we focus on the homeowners, and just really helping to revitalize these underserved neighborhoods. When we do programs like our Rock the Block, for instance, this year it looks a little different because of COVID, but traditionally it's a 2-day event where we'll bring 400 plus community volunteers and over 36 hours. And it's always in South Oak Park. It has been for the last couple of years. And the idea is that we want to stay there for 3 to 5 years so that we can really make a true, tangible impact on helping to revitalize that neighborhood. When we do the community projects, the idea is, we're already building homes and repairing homes in this neighborhood, but then how can we help also improve the community assets? And so we'll focus on, the community centers. We've put in community gardens, helped fix the local park and uplift that, and really just making sure that it's a well-rounded revitalization of the community to help instill a little bit more of that pride and remind those living there that, you're not alone. We're certainly not here. Habitat's not here to save the day by any means, but we are here to work hand in hand with residents to support them.